Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar from the Early Career Network of NuGO. Today we invited Siân Astley from the Eurofear AISBL to give us an overview about how to prepare nice and interesting posters for scientific meetings. We apologize, we are a little bit late, we had some technical issues, but we are all good to go now. As usual, if you have questions, please use the question box on your control panel. And at the end, you are going to read them and Siân can reply to you. So I leave this to Siân now. She can introduce herself.
Okay.
Enjoy the webinar.
Thank you very much. Okay, share my screen. Hopefully, Charlie has pressed record for those people that can't.
Yes, I do.
All right, welcome. Who am I? This is me. I don't always look that tidy and probably don't look that tidy today. So what am I? Who am I? Why do I get to be here talking to you about posters? Well, I'm a scientist by training. I have a bachelor's in cell and molecular sciences. I have a master's in clinical medicine. I've got a PhD in diet and health, and I did do postdoc research between 1997 and 2004. And then in 2004, I discovered I was actually much better at talking about science than I was doing it. I have a really low boredom threshold, and frankly, molecular biology experiments that go wrong on Tuesday and you find that out on Friday were beginning to bore me senseless. You have to be of a particular mindset. I'm not. So talking about it was much more fun, and all credit to those that can do that work, and because I know that I can't. So as part of that, I went off and did a diploma in science communication. And in 2012, I moved to Eurofear ASBL, which is a non-profit association based in Brussels, which also arose from a network of excellence. We're all about delivering high quality, validated food composition information and increasing awareness both of the what is needed for that information and how it can be used, not least by consumers and in making healthier dietary choices. I've got 27 peer review articles and more than 300 other articles, which such as websites, trade, magazines, yeah, any number. So what do I do? Well, Monday to Thursday, I'm a senior researcher for Eurofear and the communications manager, as well as being responsible for training. But I'm also a self-employed science communicator, which I tend to do Friday to Sunday. I'm an editor for food chemistry and also for the Encyclopedia of Food and Health. And also, both of those belong to Elsevier. I'm also currently editing a book on health claims and food labelling, and I'm an independent expert for the European Commission and other funding bodies, which means I look at the proposals or I review projects to see how they're progressing. What do I do for Eurofear? Well, I engage in research activities for particular projects. I promote knowledge and development of skills amongst individuals and organisations. I provide expertise and seek proactively opportunities to promote the projects in which we're involved with, either as a partner or a coordinator. And often my job is balancing the desires between what scientists want to be doing, which is generally not talking about their work unless it's to other scientists, and what funding organisers want, which is to talk about the science to the people that are paying for it. That can be quite challenging at times. I provide support in all matters related to communication and dissemination, websites, social media, talking to the media themselves, but I also co-write proposals and involved in the reporting. And I'm there as a bridge. I provide a credibility gap between someone who perhaps does purely public relations, which is not me. I'm not there to make people like the science, and pure scientists who just want to be getting on with the science. So I provide a bridge over those two. And I ensure for the funding organisations that there's a high level of communication services, that it's value for money. So that's more than enough about me. What is a poster is the first question. So a poster is a printed publication attached to a vertical surface. So hopefully we now are all clear about what we're talking about. They are typically text and graphics, but it can be just a graphic or it can be just text. It doesn't have to be both. They're designed to be eye-catching and informative, and they can be used for many purposes, but most of the time you are advertising something, and which is not the same as advertising a product for purchase, but it's your opportunity to excuse me, to step up and wave your hands and say, look, this is what I'm doing and I want you to know about it. So why do researchers need or want to advertise? Well, if you look purely at the legal reasons, most of your funding bodies, most of the contracts that someone signs in your organization will say that dissemination of results, the passing of information, is a contractual obligation. And consortia, groups of partners, are required to provide tangible proof that they have communicated. Now, I think those are two lousy reasons to do communication. I don't see an incentive, and I don't see any benefit for the individuals doing it. I think the best reasons for doing it is it's your opportunity to promote understanding and participation in what you do. That's not the same necessarily as support for what you do. It may be that you talk about what you do and somebody says, I don't think that's worthwhile. I don't think you should be spending money on that. That's fine. The point is that they have been informed and they have an opinion. So you've done your job. It's to solicit funding from national governments. Your national government has a whole tranche of people out there who are trying to get money out of them. It also applies to regional authorities, and it actually applies to your university or your organization. If you don't stand up and say, this is me, this is what I'm doing, and this is why it's important, the funding will go somewhere else because someone else will shout louder than you. Most scientists are not great at selling themselves. It's not something that we enjoy, but we need to find a way to communicate what we do and why it's worthwhile, and posters offer you an opportunity to do that. It's to raise interest amongst potential partners, people who might be able to help you with different expertise. It's to encourage talented students and other scientists to join in. It's about enhancing reputation. That's your reputation as a researcher, but also your organization's reputation. It helps in the search of additional funding support to exploit the results. When that initial batch of funding ends, the work very rarely stops, but you've got to find another way to fund where you go to next. And it's about generating market demand, advertising in its real sense of putting out a product and saying, here is my product, what would you like to do with it? So I can't teach you to communicate, not in this webinar. I could do it under different circumstances, but not here. But what I can help you do is to define your messages or tell you how to go about doing that. It's to understand and establish who your audience is and understand a bit more about them in order to help communicate your message. I can help you select appropriate ways of doing that, even within a poster, to tailor the information for where it's going, to maximize the amount of exposure that your message is going to get, and to access useful resources, many of which will actually be within your organization, but you might not be aware that they're there. So the first thing I say to everybody who says to me, well, what am I going to say about this, is you need to worry about your 5 W's and your 1 H. And they are very simply who, where, when, why, what, how. So who did the work? You. Where was the work done? Your organization. When was it done? Why was it done? What was it that you did? And how did you do it? There is a difference between what was done and how. There is another thing in that, which I add, which is the so what. And the so what is about why should a busy person stop and listen to you and give you their time to listen to what you've got to say or to read your poster. And if you can't tell me the so what, I'm probably going to be bored with your work and move on. So you need to think about Why? Why is it important? Why does someone need to stop and give you that time? So scientific posters describe research, often at conferences and meetings, but they can be used again in corridors of your organization, so visitors see them on the way past. Your aim, provide an eye-catching and thought-provoking presentation. It is not to provide the entire technical annex in large print. Try not to bore people, and reading the entire technical annex in large print will certainly do that. It's a tool for providing information, for obtaining feedback and creating opportunities. They are almost always short works in progress. They're a plea for help. They're a vehicle for looking for collaboration, looking for an easy route for researchers to begin to publish and to hone their presentation skills and to start this magical thing that everybody tells young researchers they have to do, which is network. Posters are there to start creating those networking skills. They're often wrongly regarded as less important as an oral presentation. So somebody is very impressed that you get an oral, they're a bit less impressed that you've got a poster. Don't take it on board. Posters are important, and in fact they are not given the time and credit that they should be given very often in the programme. So effective communication with posters is not simple, and experienced researchers often get it wrong. So don't look to necessarily at your more experienced postdoc colleagues and think, oh, well, I've got to do it like that. There may be a different and better way to do it. There's some things you need to know about humans in order to make posters better. We're essentially lazy creatures. We much prefer to read portrait to landscape. So portrait is taller than it is wide. We don't like landscape because it means that we have to turn our head to read things. There is a drawback of portrait with posters in that we don't like bending either to read. So bending to read that crucial thing at the bottom of the poster actually goes against us, and we tend to move on to the next poster. We almost always review posters from about a metre or more away, and there is almost always a crowd of people eating and drinking and talking about something else in front of your poster, so that the person that wants to read it is having to look around them. So keep that in mind. And we are easily bored when we're reading large print on a vertical surface. So I keep talking about bored, but yeah, just keep that in mind. We also need to understand a bit about how we understand messages. How we understand what something is telling us is determined by who we are. That can be demographics and social factors affecting our perception and our response. So simply by being male or female will affect how you respond to a message that is put up on a poster. It's affected by race, it's affected by social and cultural background, it's affected by your age, your marital status, whether you've got children, your political worldview, your affiliations, your income, your education, and your amount of scientific training. And there are any number of publications out there that demonstrate that. And it is as true for experts as it is for the general public. So for example, if you take toxicologists, nothing to do with NuGO, but there was a study done in 1992 where they took male and female toxicologists who were essentially matched for everything else, marital status, number of children, apart from the fact that some of them were male, some of them were female. And every time the female toxicologists rated the risks higher. So they perceived the same message differently. So you need to be aware of that when you're creating your messages. So you need to be very clear about what it is you're trying to tell people. When you're writing an academic paper, you start in a very accepted way of presenting the information. So you start with your introduction, then you write your methods, then your results and your discussion and your conclusions. So as you move down that triangle, you get more information and it gets increasingly important. When you're starting to write for things like posters or trade articles or articles in the media, you actually turn it on your head. So you put more information in the headlines and in your 5 Ws and your 1H, and then you put less and less in terms of the discussion, the method, and the background, and it gets decreasingly important as you get further down. And if you want to see this in practice, go and get a good old-fashioned newspaper, or even a newspaper online, and what you will find is most of the story is presented in the headline and the first paragraph. And you probably don't need to read the rest of it to get the point that the newspaper editor is making. All you will do by reading subsequent paragraphs is reinforce the information that's already been provided. And that also applies, or should apply, with posters. So, more practically, identify who your audience is. Who are you talking to? Are you talking to a peer group? So a lot of other nutrigenomics, nutrigenetics research scientists. Are you talking to other professionals such as healthcare or allied services? So are you talking to medics, clinicians, or dietitians, or are you talking to consumers? You need to know that because it determines, firstly, what language you use, and I'm not talking about spoken language in terms of whether you're English, Dutch, Norwegian, whatever. I'm talking about the type of language you use in order to communicate your information. You also then need to give consideration to what language are you communicating in, and is it your native language, and is it the people who are reading your posters, is it their native language? In most cases, most of you are going to be communicating in a language that's your second or third language, and many of your readers will be working in English as second or third language. So again, you need to be much more precise in your language to ensure that your message gets across. Define your message. We'll come back to that in a minute. What is it that you want to say? What is the most important point that you want to make? And what do you want out of this? Be clear about your goal. Why are you doing this? Are you looking for a collaborator, or are you simply broadcasting that this is the work that you're doing? Consider your timing. When should you do this? In this case, it's specifically for NuGO Week, but there will be other occasions when you think, do I do that poster then? Or do I wait until a publication is out or a particular event that is particularly attractive to the kinds of people I'm trying to reach out to? Consider whether publication of your data will jeopardize future peer review publications or intellectual property rights, and make sure that you have the permission of your sponsors and or your organization. Strictly speaking, if you're funded by EU money, you should ask your scientific officer to permission to publish it. You'll never get it, not because they won't give permission, but simply because there'd be way too many requests for them to be able to say yes to all of them. The simple solution to that, and often the solution with any funding organisation, is to send them the abstract and tell them this is going to be published on this date at this event. And then you've done everything you need to do. Get your experts involved. It's quite possible that somewhere in your organisation you have a reprographics department or other individuals who are experts in design and the development of posters or other forms of advertising, who have many skills in their own ability as you do in science. Go out there, find out where they are, and try and co-opt their help, because they will save you time and it will look better at the end of the day. I can design a logo, but I'm just not creative in that way. And so I have huge respect for my colleagues who are creative in that way, and I try to give them as much time as possible when I go with a new project and I say, these are the keywords for this new project. I would like you to come up with a logo. This is what we're trying to achieve. And then I have to go away and give them time, because none of us can be creative on demand. But keep that in mind, that the help is out there. You have to go and find it. Acknowledge the sponsors of your work. Who provided the money? You might say to me, oh, well, it's just my organisation's money. No, that money came from somewhere, probably the taxpayer. And you need to say thank you very much. No one is going to give you a gift and have you just walk away with it. you need to say thank you, and the way to do that is to acknowledge where the funding came from. Particularly so if you have EU funding or you've received a fellowship or other financial support. If you're with NuGO, try and think about NuGO. If your organisation's a NuGO member, let's get the NuGO logo on any publications. Check the dimensions of your poster board. Nothing sillier than arriving with a nice portrait poster only to discover that actually the information said that all posters should be landscape. Proofread your poster, or better still, get someone else to do it, because certainly the printers won't guess that you meant micro and not milli, because most of them won't even know what the difference is or what it means. Provide A4 copies of your posters. They're too small to read in detail, but they're useful for when you get back to your desk. How many times do you throw the proceedings onto a bookshelf, never to look at it again, or you've had those proceedings in electronic form and you don't really access them, but out of your bag floats an A4 copy of a poster and you think, ah, yes, I meant to contact that person and ask them about something. Just before you photocopy those A4 copies, write your email address and your other contact details up the side of it in large print so that they don't have to use a magnifying glass to go and find that. Now, unlike papers, strictly speaking, there is only convention about the order of presentations like posters. Most posters are very traditional in that triangle that I spoke about, where you've got introduction, methods, results, discussion, but it's only convention that puts them that way. You might find your senior staff more reluctant to change it, but try and persuade them of the merits of moving the information around. Start with clear, factual information. Keep your title as short as possible, whilst including all or as many relevant keywords as you can. Try and avoid abbreviations in the title, because even other scientists may not know what you mean, and if they don't know what you mean, they're not going to stop and read your poster. Explain why the work was done. Stick to your key findings and your key outcomes. Make sure there is a relationship between your aims and your conclusions and your future work to tell a story. Most posters are not reporting work that is finished, so there will always be a next step. And that's quite often the bit that you might want to be looking for help with. But there needs to be, it's no good having two aims and then the conclusions are nothing to do with those aims. You can legitimately say, those were our aims and we failed to get a result that made any sense for those aims, but what we got was these results and therefore these are our conclusions. But you still need to tell that story. Make sure you've got contact details and links in your posters. They're not full scientific papers, so cut out the excess. And I would always say avoid writing sentences on posters. Make use of bullet points, because people won't read the sentences, and anyway, it'll mean the font's too small, which means that the ones who are reading it from 2 meters away over a crowd will move on to the poster further along. Defining your message. So, okay, nothing to do with nutrigenomics, but an example of X, some researcher working on a highly specific molecular marker for hepatocellular carcinoma, currently diagnosed through detection of neoplastic lesions only in an advanced state of evolution. A fairly typical peer-reviewed paper title. It does tell you stuff, but it's not enough stuff to make me put my glass of wine down and stop and read your poster. So you can shorten it to X is developing a fast and cheap method for detecting liver cancer at an earliest enough stage to permit life-saving treatment. Or you could have something like beating liver cancer. Now, you could argue that the bottom one is disingenuous because it's too simplistic, but the point is you've stopped the person and they might now read the rest of your poster. If you're too scared to go for the last one because it is a bit too simple, then I would suggest that something in the middle is more appropriate. Certainly the top one, unless you are hugely interested in hepatocellular carcinoma, would drive the person onto the next poster. Use large text and font size, and if you want to know how large, print it out and stick it on a wall and then move away from it until you get to the point where you can't read it comfortably. you're going to find that actually you need to have really large text to read it comfortably at more than sort of a metre and a half away. Present your text in blocks with clear headings. Again, boredom will strike if the route around the poster isn't obvious. People get frustrated with it and they'll move away. Use colour, but be aware that around about 12% of men and about 0.2% of women have some sort of issue with colour perception. I'm always slightly frustrated by the fact that microarrays are displayed in red and green, which is the commonest issue with colour. Highlight the more important areas of text, put a colour under it, put a box around it, put pointy arrows at it if you have to, but make sure that your reader knows that's the important point. Bright colours, heavy lines on figures, and stick with the same colour for the same issue, the same chemical, the same form of analysis, the same person on the different graphs that you may put on your poster. So there's some sort of continuity. Consider whether something might be better on a dark background, and like I said, use false colour, but be aware of the false colours you're choosing. This is just an example of why not to use capital letters. They're the same text. When we learn to read, we learn every single letter. As we get older, we start reading by word shape. Which is why if you put essentially badly spelled stuff up, so long as they're sort of vaguely showing the word that we meant them to be, people will read them correctly. That's why spotting typos when you're familiar with the text is really difficult. If you use capital letters, you annihilate the shape of the word, and therefore you make it much more difficult to read. And if it's difficult to read, people won't read it. They'll move on. Fancy text is fine, but use it for main titles and highlights. Mind having too many colours, mind that the colours work on the background. Generally on a poster or a presentation, 3 colours is enough. Try to avoid italics. It's okay to read here, but it gets more and more difficult as you move away because there's less distinction between the letters. Underline is okay on a word that has no downstrokes, but it's immensely annoying on words that have downstrokes because, again, you are losing the clarity of the word shape, and the older you get, the more you need that clarity, and you're talking to some of your more senior researchers who might need a little help. So if you want to attract their attention, make sure you're using those kind of things. Oh, and mind the punctuation. 3 exclamation marks being slightly ironic. Don't overdo it. Like I said, get some help if you've got designers that you can get access to. It's an integral part of a print design project working is the design that's behind it. Balance your word and your picture choices. It's subjective and it changes according to fashion, but it can really help to communicate what it is you're trying to say, and try to be respectful of other people's skills. You are not a designer. Images, always high quality. When they're pixelated, it's just annoying. Keep the diagram simple, eliminate any unessential detail. Not more than 4 colours per diagram, not more than 3 across the 3 or 4 across the whole poster. Present the most important data in the brightest colours. Be aware that we change colour perception as we get older. We start to lose the red end of the spectrum as we get older. Be consistent, so related data, same colour. Make sure there's a scale along the horizontal and vertical axes. Don't have footnotes or references within the figure. Put them somewhere else where they're big enough. And have a think about things like images of vivisection and disability. Researchers, health professionals, they know what a frog or rat in the process of some sort of animal experiment looks like. So that's not bringing anything for their information, and it may put off some of your other readers. You always have to ask yourself with an image or a figure, what is it contributing? And if it's not contributing something to a limited space on a poster, get rid of it. You don't need it. And that's a point I would make with all images and diagrams and tables. Is it adding something? If not, it's just taking up space, which might well be better as white space. Don't be afraid of white space on a poster. It gives the eye a rest, and therefore people are able to read it more easily. Copyright. If you source your photographs, If you're sourcing them from the literature or online, you may be breaching copyright. Yes, they're nice to find, but just because it's royalty free doesn't mean that it's free to use. You might want to make good quality copies from existing documents that you own. Failure to respect copyright will lead to legal redress, particularly from the US. I have known colleagues to borrow images and then get a letter from a publishing house's legal representative saying, you don't get to do that, we own that and you did not ask. And my advice would be, if in doubt, ask permission to reproduce it, and always print an acknowledgement even when you've asked for that. And it would be the same as using information out of a paper and not referencing it. It's cheating. And the same is true of images as well. So don't steal images. When I'm looking at a poster, what do I judge a poster on? I've done more than I care to think about, both for NuGO and other projects. Layout, colour choice, font, type and size. How obvious is it to find my way around the poster? Are the funding and acknowledgements there? Are the conclusions clear, and is there future work? Are the aims clear and brief? Are the figures sensible, necessary, legible and appropriate? Comes back to the, does it add something? Is there a relationship between the final product and the abstract and the title? It is really frustrating when you look through proceedings, you find an abstract and you think, I want to go and look at that poster. And then you find either the poster has completely changed into something else, different title, different authors, sometimes different topic. But worse, sometimes you've just now got the abstract in large print. Well, that's like inviting somebody to a party, and then when they get there, they either find that it was fancy dress and they weren't told, or it wasn't fancy dress and they were told it was, or it's at a completely different venue. It's not fair, it's not nice, don't do it. And you know, if I can read the abstract and I don't need to go and look at your poster, then I promise you I have other things to be doing. So give people a reason to come and read your poster. Make sure the language is accessible, avoid jargon, avoid abbreviations if you can, and if you have jargon or abbreviations, make sure you've explained them. Be creative and don't be boring. And that's it. And I hope that that was helpful.
Thank you very much, Jan. This was really interesting, very nice. There is a much more technical aspects that we should consider when you prepare a poster that we actually think about. For me, at least, it was very interesting.
Good.
I see that there are no questions from the audience. I think we were very clear. I don't know if Sarah or somebody else want to make another remark. Or you, Sean?
My only remark is that if somebody thinks of something and that they would like to ask, or they would like somebody just to give them a quick comment on their poster, then they're very welcome to ask you or Ingeborg for my email address, and I will try and answer those questions offline.
Okay, thank you very much. That will be very helpful. Ingeborg is also thanking you for your presentation.
You're very welcome.
With this, I think we can close this session. Thanking you again, Sean, for this great tutorial, and we hope to see great posters at NuGO Week this year.
Yeah, hope so. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.